Hello, it's John Heaton, and this evening I'm going to talk about the latest developments in the story of Fleetwood Mac. The troubled history of Fleetwood Mac. The latest instalment is the fact that Lindsey Buckingham was asked to leave the band against his will a few months ago, and he's just announced that he's suing them for lost earnings of $12 million, suing the other four members, Stevie Nicks, John McVie, Mick Fleetwood, and Christine McVie. To me, this lineup with the five of them, including Buckingham, is the best lineup the band's ever had, with all due respect to Peter Green and fans of his era. I think without Lindsey Buckingham, I wouldn't go and see them personally. I did see them once in 1988 on the Tango in the Night tour, just because I'd never seen them before, and Lindsey unfortunately decided not to tour with that album. And I saw them, I forget where it was, in London, twice on that tour, or once, I can't remember. Once, and then I think I did see them on the Say You Will tour with Lindsey in 2003, but without Christine. Then it begs the question, which one of them is the more dispensable out of the three? I don't think any of them are dispensable, but if you ask me to pick the least dispensable for a live band, for a live tour, it would be Lindsey, because I think songwriting-wise, maybe they're roughly equal in terms of the chestnuts they've come out with for Fleetwood Mac. But Lindsey's contribution is much more than just the songwriting. I think he really makes the songs, in quite a few cases, helping Christine and Stevie develop their material. And I'm thinking particularly at tracks like Everywhere from Christine on Tango in the Night, Landslide from Stevie, Sisters of the Moon, just loads of tracks where I think Lindsey's contribution is pretty central to the whole recording, in the studio at least, and I think the same would be true on stage. So I'm not going to fork out the money. That tickets are not cheap these days for live bands, and I can sympathise with the younger bands charging more money because people are not buying too many albums these days compared to the olden days. But a group like Fleetwood Mac, I think they could comfortably live on the royalties they made in the 70s and 80s. I looked up what they're worth online, not that it's that reliable, and quite staggered to find out Lindsey Buckingham's worth $80 million, Mick Fleetwood a paltry $20 million, Stevie Nicks $75 million, Christine McVie $65, and John McVie $50. So I don't really think they need to tour for money. They could probably live comfortably off the royalties, or maybe Mick and John couldn't because they didn't write the songs, so maybe they've got an incentive to tour. But I think the way I see it these days is money tends to determine what they should do, and they just go out with anyone. And they're going out now without Lindsey, and they've replaced Lindsey with two people, Neil Finn, formerly of Crowded House, and Mike Campbell, formerly of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And those guys are covering Lindsey's work, not only guitar work, but vocally. I guess one of them, probably Neil, is singing the Lindsey numbers, and I checked out the set list, and they're doing Secondhand News Monday Morning and Go Your Own Way, presumably with Neil Finn singing. They're also doing Don't Stop, which is co-sung and co-written by Lindsey, and World Turning co-written as well between Lindsey and Christine, and then The Chain written by all five of them. So it's a little bit, I think I'd find it very unsatisfactory going to see that. It reminded me a bit of, and then they're also doing a Don't Dream It's Over from Crowded House, and I think there's a Split Enz song there, and I think Stevie Nicks is covering Free Falling, the old Tom Petty number, presumably because Mike Campbell's in the band. But this struck me as a bit similar to Ringo Starr's All-Star Band, where he just gets people to come and do guests, come out the front and do their couple of numbers and then go back. It's not quite like that, because obviously a Fleetwood Mac concert is still 90% Fleetwood Mac, but to have someone else sing Lindsey's songs is actually even worse than the Ringo Starr concept, because at least in the Ringo Starr concerts people were singing, like Gary Wright was singing his own songs, and Roger Hodgson and whoever was in the band was singing their own songs. Here it's not the case. So I'm certainly not going to travel to London. If they come over here, I might consider it, but they're not going to do that. They seem to be just touring the States and nothing else. So that was that. So I'm very sad about Lindsey leaving, but then having said that, the last album they put out was 2003, Say You Will, and the last time they were truly relevant musically, I think it was probably, you know, Tusk in 1979. And I think since then they've been a commercially successful band, but even as far back as '82, I remember seeing them Top of the Pops doing Oh Diane, and it was completely out of kilt versus everything else on the programme. And although I enjoyed Mirage and Tango in the Night, I think their last great magnum opus was Tusk. I enjoyed Say You Will, but whether that should be a Fleetwood Mac album, I don't know, because it didn't have Christine, and the last album between Lindsey and Christine could have been a Fleetwood Mac album because Mick Fleetwood and John McVie were on it, but it wasn't. It was titled Buckingham McVie, and I guess that was probably because Stevie Nicks said, "We're not in demand, so it can't be called Fleetwood Mac," perhaps, I don't know. But they've been touring on and off for as long as one can remember, and it's just getting a bit boring. It's a bit like the Stones touring. And when Lindsey, I had a lot of respect for Lindsey and a lot of sympathy for him when they asked him to leave, and he was upset about that, and he wrote an impassioned letter saying, after the 40 years of history with the finishing line in sight, surely this is not the way to end. And I think that's a good thing to say, but then he went and sued them. $12 million loss of earnings. Well, I was a bit disappointed by that, because one thing he needs some money. He was obviously bitter at the way he'd been treated. But I would have had more respect for Lindsey if he'd just said, "Okay, I'm sad, but there's nothing I can do about my own improve how good I am." And I saw a solo rendition of Mellow back again on YouTube the other day, very impassioned, probably with a new meaning now. I don't need to see him with the other members of Fleetwood Mac. I can't actually see him in a solo concert. And also I'm a bit cynical, because for the last 40 years, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham would be kind of off and on pretending they were still a couple on stage, kind of, you know, flirting with each other or making eye contact during tracks like Say Goodbye to You or Go Your Own Way. And they probably do it for a reason, because it sells records and it sells tickets, and everyone likes to talk about the troubled history of Fleetwood Mac. But quite frankly, if they got over those sticky early years after their breakup, then why can they not get on together now? Not that I need them together. As I say, it's a bit like the Stones. Why does the world really need another Fleetwood Mac concert, or indeed a Fleetwood Mac album? I think I'd rather just sit back and have listen to the albums, and this book does a good job going through all their albums, and it's noticeable after Lindsey left that they struggled artistically, and I think on stage they would struggle to match the sound without Lindsey's contribution. So that's my view. I'm a bit sad at the way this great band's history has ended. I mean, I guess it's in keeping with their troubled relationships, etc., that it shouldn't end happily, but it's a little bit disappointing, and there we have it. So thanks for watching. See you later.